So the resolution to Job ultimately is trusting God, because he is a wise and powerful God who knows the end from the beginning and is in complete and total control of every single aspect of not only your life but the whole universe. And this is all brought out finally in chapter 38 to 42, where God finally encounters Job. And he never answers Job's question, and Job never finds out why he ended up suffering the way he did. He never gets that answer. But what is interesting is this. At the beginning of the book of Job, I can't remember the chapter, but the thing that touched his family and killed all of his children, and the children in that culture are your immortality, was a whirlwind that came and took out the house. Well, isn't it interesting that God does not follow proper psychology, where you're supposed to stay away from the things that brought you your trauma, but when he appears to Job, finally, to settle this issue and talk to Job, he appears in a whirlwind. And Job, that's supposed to tell Job that even in the midst of a whirlwind, which is one of the most chaotic things you can imagine in nature, right? It's just a whirlwind. In the middle of the whirlwind is God and his voice. And that is, to me, that is the resolution of Job. In the midst of the chaos is God upholding his world. And then, but it doesn't stop there, then God questions Job. And the purpose of the questions are they're not, as it was George Bernard Shaw, I believe, who, anyway, there was a quote there that he made. It was a very sarcastic quote. It wasn't a good one. But the point being that to answer Job's dilemma, what happened to him, would require an understanding of how the whole thing works, past, present, and future. It is only when you see it from that holistic viewpoint that Job will be able to pin his particular suffering on a map to his own satisfaction. Right. But the problem is, finite Job, like all of us finite people, our minds are just not capable of grasping that full picture. And and I'm so glad God didn't give Job an answer, because it would have been petty, and it would have been cheap, and everybody would have found fault with it, right? And we sense this when we go to sit with somebody who is in grief, and they are asking why, we want to give them an answer. And you notice how difficult, because no matter what we say, it sounds petty, and it never solves the problem. In fact, sometimes it can make it worse, as Job's friends did. And God doesn't give an answer to Job because he respects Job. He says, you're not created in this way. You do not know the whole picture. If you did, then you would see how it perfectly fits. You just have to trust that I am good and that I'm in control. And Job is left with trust in God for no matter what happens.
Doesn't J.I. Packer say something like, if we could understand, we would be God?
Exactly.
And because we are human, we can't wrap our minds around it.
Yeah.
So God wouldn't have been doing Job an injustice. He would have been blowing his mind.
Right. And George Tesson, okay, you answer me this. Do you know how this works? And do you know how that works? And do you know who? And do you know who? So you see, you can't even understand these things. How are you going to understand the whole of it? Your mind just isn't big enough for that. And that's why I'm here and I trust you. But what is interesting is, a lot of the areas that God questions Job on are areas that are normally under the power of chaos. And what God is saying is, I hold the chaos at bay, and I'm in control of the chaos, and you have to trust me for that.
Right.
So that's how Job is finally resolved, and his friends who try to give him the answer are God condemns them. You have not spoken right by me, as my servant Job. And what did Job speak rightly? It's actually what he didn't speak. Yes. He didn't admit that he was at fault, and that was his great moral victory. He wouldn't succumb to the pressure and take the easy way out and say, okay, fine, maybe I did sin and that's why I'm suffering. That would be the easy way out, and he never took that. and he maintained his integrity. He got pretty close to blaspheming against God, but he never crossed that line.
But he shut his mouth.
He shut his mouth in the end. So that is the resolution to Job.